Hi everyone, Alien Earth is officially out, and critics are unanimously praising it, awarding it high scores. However, the first 2 episodes have drawn a mixed reaction from viewers, which on the whole was to be expected. In the next few minutes, we'll break down what the beginning of the series got right, and what fell a bit flat. And of course, we'll discuss the details and Easter eggs, of which there were a surprising amount. You don't need to worry about spoilers because when we get to them, we'll be sure to give you a heads up. So get comfortable, because this is going to be interesting. And let's start with what immediately grabs your attention, namely the atmosphere. Showrunner Noah Hawley really managed to get close to the original Alien in this aspect, at least judging by the opening scene and certain details. The ship, the crew's awakening, the surroundings, and the casual breakfast conversations are direct callbacks to Ridley Scott's film. The slow, unsettling pace, heralding an imminent slaughter, is truly reminiscent of the first installment. And this whole scene is, in essence, a miniature remake of it. We are taken from cryosleep to the death of the entire crew in just a few minutes. And at first, this instills hope that the creators have genuinely brought the best aspects of the franchise into the series, and that it will only get better from here. However, the differences soon start to become apparent. At the forefront of new ideas is the central storyline involving the transfer of children's consciousness into synthetics. This results in a kind of human-android hybrid, raising themes of artificial intelligence and humanity. It was perhaps this engagement with the contemporary discourse of recent years that impressed critics the most. The philosophical slant on the question of what makes a human human runs through the first few episodes and will likely continue. But this seems to be the most controversial decision, as it is a stark departure from everything we've seen in the franchise before. Other than Wendy and the fact that she's a product of advanced technology with the consciousness of a 12-year-old girl, little was known about her behavior, not to mention the other test subject children who seemed like secondary characters on the periphery of the plot. However, the series tries to devote time to each of them and to explore their relationships and behavioral quirks. The concept of a child in an adult's body is questionable in itself. When you combine it with an alien monster that is supposed to evoke fear and create an atmosphere of hopelessness, the dynamic changes. In the series Stranger Things and the film It, introducing children into horror worked successfully, but Alien was originally geared in a different direction. This is why longtime fans of the franchise are now sharply criticizing the show's creators. And new viewers don't understand the reasons because for the most part there are no complaints about the actors themselves. They behave, communicate, and act as children their age should. This also creates comical situations, like a lack of seriousness about what's happening and conversations about the anatomical differences between male and female bodies. But this is precisely what is now the main reason for criticism of the series. As for the portrayal of the Xenomorph, it does its job. The deadly alien which indiscriminately destroys everyone serves as the main antagonist. In this regard, the production team deserves credit for not delaying its appearance until the very end. The alien appears before us in all its glory almost from the very beginning. However, there are questions about it as well, because it has lost a certain mystique and now stalks its victims down corridors like a wild predator. It has claimed more victims in the first 2 episodes than in all the previous films combined. And, naturally, this has caused dissatisfaction among fans of the original film, where the alien was a hidden threat that attacked from the darkness, and its presence was felt on a subconscious level. Now, it doesn't hesitate to hunt in the open. Also, based on the first 2 episodes, the role of the other 4 new species isn't entirely clear yet. Why were they introduced if the main threat is the Xenomorph? Perhaps we just need to be patient, and the writers will develop this storyline further. Speaking of patience, the unhurried and at times even slow narrative pace has struck many as too drawn out. Of course, this is done so that we can get used to the new characters, learn more about them, and empathize with their fate. The series format also played its part, which is why the narrative unfolds so deliberately. However, in the creator's defense, it must be said that this helps with atmospheric immersion. Some critics who have seen a bit more note that events will pick up speed later on, but the beginning is indeed slow. And Hawley on the whole should know perfectly well how to captivate an audience from the first few minutes, considering his track record. But the first episodes seem to misuse their allotted time and are in no hurry. Overall, the impressions from watching the 2 episodes are mostly positive. Yes, it's not without its flaws, plot holes, and controversial decisions with the child-adult heroes. Time will tell how Alien Earth will handle its new format and in what direction the story will develop. For now, however, this experiment is definitely one of the most intriguing projects in its genre at the moment. But as always, the final opinion is yours to form in the comments, and in the meantime, we'll move on to the plot details and references the creators left for us. So, the spoilers start right now. The first thing to note is that Alien Earth creates ambiguity around the events of Prometheus and Covenant and essentially rewrites their history, even though the opposite was promised. The series effectively ignores the events of the prequels, and unlike in Romulus, there is no mention of the Black Goo, Peter Weyland's journey to meet the engineers, or David's experiments. The spaceship Magellan, which crash-landed and became the basis of the plot, was sent on its mission 65 years ago. The series is set in the year 2120, which means the crew discovered the Xenomorphs before David began his fateful experiments. Prometheus and Covenant were built around the idea that the Xenomorphs came into existence thanks to Michael Fassbender's character. David commandeered a ship, making it clear that he would continue experimenting with Xenomorphs, presumably until he created the classic form. However, Alien Earth clearly shows that Xenomorphs existed long before David. And that's not to mention that the series directly contradicts the events of the Alien vs. Predator films, changing the date of the first Xenomorph landing on Earth, but this crossover has long been disregarded in the official timeline, so it can be ignored. Furthermore, Alien Earth has managed to introduce significant changes to the franchise's minor details in just 2 episodes. The biggest changes have affected the history of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. For years, it was depicted as so omnipresent that it was simply called the Company, and everyone knew what that meant. Fans assumed it was the only megacorporation on Earth with almost complete control over both the planet and the galaxy as a whole, including colonization. However, the 5 new corporations in the series have refuted this belief. We now know that 5 different companies control different parts of the Earth. Weyland-Yutani still holds a monopoly on the stars, but companies like Prodigy dominate the race for human immortality. The series also introduced new alien forms, although it was previously believed that the galaxy was inhabited only by xenomorphs and engineers. However, this was already clear from the trailers. We also can't ignore the direct references to some legendary projects. Wendy and her brother loved to watch Ice Age in their childhood, as mentioned in the flashbacks. However, fans suspect that the references to it were not accidental. The presence of xenomorphs on Earth is being compared to a kind of ice age that cleansed the planet. All 5 invasive species, according to the show's internal mythology, could do the same to Earth's fauna. It seems that Hawley drew a direct analogy with the consequences of the Magellan crash. An analogy can also be seen in the references to Peter Pan, including the island of Neverland and the head of the Prodigy Corporation reading the book itself. By the way, attentive viewers might have noticed that the father of the main characters in the flashbacks was played by Noah Hawley himself. Interestingly, the visual depiction of the Xenomorphs was slightly altered in the series. Since they have no visible eyes, it was believed that they see through a sense of smell or echolocation, like moles or bats. However, in Alien Earth, this topic was expanded upon. The cyborg Morrow determined that xenomorphs can sense fear and navigate by it. Thanks to this, he successfully avoided an attack because he got a grip on himself and was able to control his fear. This, of course, raises a question about his ability to have emotions in the first place, but that decision is left to the screenwriters. Additionally, the hybrid synthetics have also changed the perception of androids in the franchise. Often being villainous characters, they have moved from creating artificial intelligent tools to attempting to achieve immortality by transferring human consciousness. David was Peter Weyland's first attempt at achieving eternal life. But Alien Earth has shown that the pursuit of immortality was much more widespread. All of Earth's corporations participated in this race, each choosing its own path. It's also worth noting that the show's canon changes all share one common trait. They make narrative sense. The series may have ignored the prequels, but for example, Peter Weyland kept his journey in Prometheus a secret, and the disappearance of the Covenant was considered an unsolved mystery. So it's possible that things could still change in the future, and David, for example, might not have created the primary xenomorph species, thus still becoming part of the overall Alien story. The main reason why making changes to the franchise made sense is that it doesn't slow down the series' development. The show doesn't need to explain the black goo from Prometheus because it's not shown on screen. We invite you to discuss in the comments how forgivable this is, and while you're at it, share your impressions from watching. And if you want a maximally detailed review of the events, be sure to let us know. That's all for today, folks. We'll see you in the next video very soon.